Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is May 23rd, 2024, and you are listening and watching the Daily AI Show live. And today we are talking about an important topic. Is the AI bubble about to burst? And with us today, we have Beth, Andy, and I'm Brian. And I think to kick this conversation off today, I basically have two articles that were sent to me, actually. In fact, Rebecca Love, who we had as a guest on the show, and yes, I am going to get back to having guests doing guest interviews. But Rebecca Love, who we had, who's a personal friend of mine as well, had texted me over two different articles, and it's these two. So I'm going to pop these up on the screen really quick as a sort of a base of having this conversation, talking about AI. And I'll say to you guys too, like, my goal for this conversation today is to not get defensive or feel like, because I think it's easy with us. We're so, I don't know, I won't say pro AI, but I mean there's a word in there that probably that is right for this show. But I do think it's interesting to have an open mind about like what they're bringing up in their articles, and then talking about whether that has any basis, or maybe that's through their own bias, or whatever the case may be. So I think that's a good starting point here. But let me just pull it up on my screen super quick. Let's see. The first one was this one, actually. So let me, there we go, other side. Sorry, I was scrolling back through it again. This was written by, it's called AI Isn't Useless, but Is It Worth It? And this was written by Molly White. Now, I do not know Molly White. This is, from what I can understand, this is like her inaugural, not that she's written a ton. If you search her name, Molly, here on citationsneeded.news, she's written a ton of articles. Apparently, she focuses a lot on blockchain and sort of her disdain for it. And she's researched it quite a bit. I will say this, I don't know Molly, but when you look at this article, this is not a fluff piece. This is not what I would consider to be a off the cuff, here's something I think is going to get clickbait type article. It's very well researched. There are tons of citations. Beth, you'll like seeing this. There are tons. If you're looking at her screen, she's doing evaluations across several different models. I mean, this is the type of article you want to see somebody write. So I'm going to come back to this one in a second. The second one, really quick, was written after it and does cite the first article. And this one was in the New York Times from May 15th, so a little bit more recent. The other one was written in mid-April. And this one's called, it's an opinion guest essay on the New York Times, and it's called Press Pause in the Silicon Valley Hype Machine. And this one was written by Julia Engwin. Also, don't know Julia, but she's a contributing opinion writer and an investigative journalist. I will tell you, we'll get into both of these. I will tell you the New York Times one does have a little bit more, it feels a little bit more like a, let's get something that's got a good title on it, and then let's follow it up and figure out what the story is. That may be a little unfair, but that was my initial impression to it. But I do want to start off with you guys with just starting and reading this one thing. And I'm going back to the Mary's article, the first one I talked about. She said, when I boil it down, I find my feelings about AI are actually pretty similar to my feelings about blockchains. They do a poor job of much of what people try to do with them. They can't do the things their creators claim they one day might. And many of the things they are well suited to do may not be altogether that beneficial. And while I do think that AI tools are more broadly useful than blockchains, they also come with similarly monstrous costs. So there's a lot more in this article. We couldn't possibly go through every single part of it, but that's, I think, a good quote to start off this conversation. And so I wanted to kind of kick it over to, I don't know, Beth, I'll kick it over to you to kick things off here. You know, what, as you think about this idea of the AI bubble, this idea about not even just like, have we peaked? But I think crucially what Mary and Julia, and I'm sorry, I want to make sure I'm getting their names correct. Molly and Julia are saying in their articles are, have what we've been promised from the biggest tech AI companies, you know, the conversation is, have they underdelivered? You know, so are we peaking? Is this a bubble? Is it about to burst? But also, should we be concerned with how much resources it takes to produce these AI models and what they do? And is the hype over?
So I'm going to broaden the concept a little bit just to say that that we are having this discussion as people in society who are engaged in work about whether this is overvalued. But we are not the people that the value is determined by, right? This is, yes, let's make it benefit all humanity, but the business case to be a little wary of this but also excited about this is the possibility that doing work is a lowered cost for businesses, and that is kind of yet to be determined, although there are lots of factors that lean in that direction. So we're sort of talking about valuation as though it were us who were going to be in control or reaping the benefits of the valuation in that kind of investment. I think in terms of society, it's whether it's going to be worth the cost or not has to do with large questions about how society is going to engage in the change of how rapidly work can get done. And we have often valued work based on hours it took to accomplish something. And that is rapidly changing. And so, if it's going to be worth the money cost to do that, depends who you're asking. If it's going to be worth a societal cost to do that, also depends who you're asking. But that's a different question often than what this is talking about.
That's a good point.
Andy, what you got?
All right. So the AI value chain is, as you suggest, is driven by demand. That is similarly driven by whether or not there are productivity gains, as a result of incorporation of AI, whether in the enterprise, in your small business, or in your home. And I'm going to lay out a case for why there is a frothy market right now for this, because there's an inflated expectation about the near term and longer term impact of this. But it's I think not frothy, it's frenetic. It's frenetic because of the incredible value that's being created by AI. I have personal experience with this. I couldn't go back, and I'm willing to invest personally in getting some of the tools that will let me do this in a more direct way than simply prompting an LLM model in the cloud. So there's I think a burgeoning demand that we're just at the vanguard for. Like, we're willing to buy some of the tools and exercise a trial. I've done that sort of thing with my little rabbit. That's not going to end up being a major productivity gainer for me, but I'm going to put out money because I have experience with using AI that systematically changed the way I work as a knowledge worker. And that is a major impact. And I think companies are going to end up supporting that. So now let me give you just some other indicators that there's something really happening here in productivity that's going to provide continuous demand over the course of many years to come. So Meta announced that AI improved ad conversion rates, which allowed them to raise their ad prices by an average of 11%.
Wow.
That's huge. Okay. Microsoft, and by the way, they're going to spend $4 billion in new AI spending in this year alone. Okay. So they're investing on their side. Why? Because it's having a significant impact. The implementation of AI has resulted in a major increase in their revenue. Okay. Microsoft announced that AI boosted Azure cloud computing sales by 7% compared to a 6% sales boost last quarter. So those are significant increases in cloud computing sales. Why? Because people are mounting things in these cloud systems. There's three major players there. Of course, it's Google, Microsoft, and Amazon.
AWS.
AWS. Okay, so those three are all going to be making huge investments in a little bit backward in the chain. Now we're talking about chips, right? So I'm going to also use chips as an indicator of where this demand is going and why it's so big and so strong. Okay, but before we go, let's just say that Microsoft also announced a $115 billion project called Project Stargate that will include millions of training GPUs, take 5 years, be 1,000 times more powerful than ChatGPT-4, and require 5 gigawatts of power, equal to the energy requirement of New York City. Okay, there's stuff happening behind the scenes here that is driving this and yes, inflating the valuations of anybody who's in the ecosystem of AI. And there are probably a lot of software companies in AI that are going to be seconded, if you will, by the major players. And so there's going to be some turmoil down there. But the major technology companies in the world are making enormous investments in AI, and that will continue to support this. So then finally, Google, they just, in their I.O. conference, they spent 3 hours talking about AI, right? And their Google Cloud customers are going to have access to Blackwell GPUs from NVIDIA by the end of this year. And that's just going to accelerate things. So the bottom line is that all these major tech companies are profiting from AI. And that isn't like one analyst said, this is not like Meta doing $150 billion investment in the metaverse, which nobody cares about, right? This is right down to the fact that I might actually consider buying a Microsoft AI Plus PC, even though I'm an Apple fanboy. Why? Because it's the lowest cost way to get one of those AI chips. If I do it through Apple, I've got to spend several $1,000s. And, I may do that as well, but not soon because I don't have that money right now. But I might be able to shell out $1,000 for a laptop that has AI built into it and a trio of chips, including a neural processing unit, a central processing unit, and a GPU from NVIDIA that's going to let me do AI locally. So that's another source of demand, right? There was argument before on the chip front that chips are going to be exploded in growth because of all the enterprises that are going to want to do the same kind of thing that I want to do. I want to bring some AI down locally. Well, they want to bring it into their enterprise. So instead of relying on the cloud computing systems, which are also growing, they're going to start to mount their own server farm, if you will, of GPUs in order to have data privacy inside the firewall of the enterprise. That's major enterprises now, and small businesses aren't going to do that. But that's just going to, this is going to float the boats of not only NVIDIA, but all the other chip manufacturers for a good time to come. So that's just, let me just talk about NVIDIA. Right now, demand for NVIDIA chips is, they say they're going to be under-resourced and unable to meet demand at least through the next 3 years. Okay, and then lots of other companies are jumping in and starting to build their own chips. Of course, Apple has their own M line of advanced chips and aren't reliant on NVIDIA. But now the limiting factor for NVIDIA is production. So it goes, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation is the one that makes most of NVIDIA's chips. And NVIDIA in the AI market has like an 85-90% share of market for AI chips. Now, TSMC, that manufacturer, says it's going to increase capacity 5x through the end of 2025. And what's that serving? That's serving this enormous demand for chips that's driven by, and that's part of the AI ecosystem. So if you're investing on the picks and shovels side, you've got, quite a few years of runway left before the bubble bursts. If you're worried about, operations in your company and you want to make investments in AI, there may not be, for companies that are offering that kind of service, a continuous demand, but it's going to be there for at least a couple more years, in my opinion. So my prediction is the bubble is not about to burst. Setting aside macroeconomic factors like Taiwan gets bombed by China. Okay, that could throw a big monkey wrench into the whole AI supply chain.
Sure. If
Well,
you
one of
remember,
the news stories that we didn't get to yesterday was it's not just Taiwan gets bombed by China, Taiwan gets invaded by China, and a kill switch has been installed between a Swedish company and TSMC so that China doesn't get that if if China invades Taiwan. So there are a bunch of ways that Taiwan
Are you saying that
like
there's actual evidence that TSMC is going to implode itself if it's attacked by China?
I believe I did not see more details about the kill switch that told exactly the effect that would happen because I'm not sure that's helpful. This is our defense.
Yeah.
Just so you
Okay.
know, we're really defended.
So
But
Yeah.
this AI thing is not just a new market space. It's a geopolitical global issue.
yes,
Yeah, and I think, it's also important to point out too, I will, just like Molly points out in her article, she says, when I say AI, I'm generally referring to generative AI, right? And I think we could have also called this show the Daily Generative AI Show, and it probably still would have held more, right? Because AI can still be a lot of machine learning. There's a lot of things going on from that side of the fence. But if we're looking at everything you just said, Andy, and I agree with you in terms of, there's a lot more to be uncovered here. We've heard Ethan Malik say it about, if everything stopped today, I think we would still find new innovative ways to use the current LLM technology, even if there was no progress. I'm paraphrasing. Sam Altman has said publicly, when I look back at 3.5 and 4 for all the fanfare they got, they didn't really affect GDPs. Like, show me where GPT-4 had that kind of impact on the world. This is the guy who runs the company who made the model. And I think what he was basically saying is, like, probably based on knowledge that he has that very, very few people in the world have, GPT-4 is really actually not that smart, right? From his perspective, right? And I'm sure he's looking at that down the road to GPT next or 5 or whatever they call it. And he has some sight over the next hill that we don't have. He's standing on a taller tower. He can see farther into the distance than we can. And he might have knowledge that says, like, I kind of know what's coming with agents and things like that. The stuff that we're doing today is going to feel very basic by standards. In fact, I just read an article today, is a good analogy for this. I think we should do a show about it, as actually Amazon. It's kind of a news story, so maybe it should have been on yesterday, but they were just saying that, like, hey, we are definitely going to improve Alexa. We're probably going to actually charge an additional fee, a subscription fee per month, to have the new, better Alexa in your house. I'm surprised she didn't go up in the other room. And so you have to think about that. There's millions of these Echo devices of all shapes and sizes or whatever. And what they were saying in the article is, like, hey, these basically become glorified. What time is it? Or set me a timer, right? I'll be honest, I do that a lot. It's either usually Spotify or set me a timer for this pasta on the stove, right? So something that we thought was really, really intelligent AI, or we might have called it AI technology in 2014, has now feels very basic by many, many standards because of what we have now. And so I can definitely see what Sam Altman's saying about, oh, what we have today is 2014 echoes. And what I know is coming are 2024 AI or whatever that version is. Right? And so anyway, I just wanted to bring that up because I think part of this problem, though, is the hype cycle. I mean, I do think Julia has a point. I just, before you get to your point, because I want to give her credit, this is what she says at the top of her article. This is the New York Times article. In my eyes, it's looking less like an all-powerful being and more like a bad intern whose work is so unreliable that it's often easier to do the task yourself. That realization has real implications for the way we, as our employees and our government, should deal with Silicon Valley's latest dazzling new thing. Acknowledging AI's flaws could help us invest our resources more efficiently and allow us to turn our attention toward more realistic solutions. Others voices some like concern, and then she goes on to quote Molly from the first article we're talking about. So she's saying there, but now a year later from when this 6-month pause was supposed to happen, it isn't really whether AI is too smart and it will take over the world. It's whether AI is too stupid and reliable to be useful.
Okay. So
Strong
there are a
word.
ton of things. Yes, there are a ton of things in this.
Go
So
ahead,
there are
Beth.
all these people talking about AGI and ASI and like what is going to happen. It's going to happen really soon. We're going to be we're going to be useless, right? Humans will no longer be needed. Jan LeCun, who is Meta, right? He's the AI brilliance behind Meta. Yes, there are more people. Don't come at me. It's just the name that I know.
Yes.
His thing is like, nah, AGI is not that close. We don't yet have AI that's the equivalent of a cat, right? Like cats can make reasoning decisions that current
Right.
AI cannot. So we're not like at the above human. We're not even like equal to feline. So like there are some other things that need to happen. He's really big on AI understanding the worldview. The other thing that I want to say about this discussion is that there's like an undercurrent of the discussion being that it's tapped out because Anthropic and Meta and Google have come out with models that equal
Mhm.
ChatGPT 4, and OpenAI has not responded. Now they've responded in a couple different ways, and they've struggled with like as when they update the system. Sometimes that's not a great update. Sometimes it makes it slower. Sometimes it makes it less likely to answer your questions or help or those sorts of things because this is not software. This is AI, and it's not X equals Y always.
Right.
It's X and maybe pick a letter in the second
Yeah,
half of the
that sounds
alphabet, but like you're totally not exactly knowing what's going to happen. But what we've heard from OpenAI is not like, ooh, we're having real problems. The people leaving OpenAI are not saying, wow, nothing's happening. What we're
Right.
hearing from OpenAI is we're moving slowly because we think we're going to freak the hell out of all of you. So we're just going to do these little in little interval steps. And who are we to say that talking to your computer and having it have no latency and you can show it a picture and like all that is a little interval step?
Mm.
But that for me is no like the behavior of the people who are closer are not behaving as though the bubble is bursting. They're behaving as though the bubble is growing.
I agree with that. So we obviously we started a show about it. So clearly we're in a camp of people who are invested in understanding and are passionate and curious about figuring out where this AI thing, generative AI for instance, is going. So that's obviously we're on this show. But if you're the general, I'm curious what you guys think. If you're the general casual user of AI, now insert ChatGPT, Google probably in a lot of cases now. Maybe there's a lot of people who know who Claude is in Anthropic. I mean, and then Meta, obviously, what they're doing with Llama 3, although they may not know some of these words like Gemini or otherwise, which is fine. But you're casual user, somebody who goes to work every day and they're just trying to find ways to be more productive. Do you feel that, in both these articles, Molly and of course I know you guys haven't read the whole thing, or maybe you have, but Julia as well, like, do they have a point? Do they have a point that to the casual user, if you're just getting the hyped up news cycles of what's coming with AGI, or what Google has stepped on their own foot doing, which is putting out videos of things that aren't capable today, tomorrow, we're not really sure how far in the future before they happen. They're very highly polished videos. Now they've stepped that back a little bit. I think I hope, have learned a lesson. We saw a little less of that with their IO, but we definitely see these hype cycles, right? Where it's like, look what it can do, only to find out it once again can't. And is that just as damaging? Then I mean, we can't stop the hype cycle because that's going to be the next news story. AGI is always going to get top billing because the robots are going to be able to do your job. You're going to have a robot in your house. That's always going to be a more exciting article than you can now write a blog article with 0.5% more accuracy using AI, which is probably more the truth. And it's also a great thing. And it's also, like you said, Andy, and you said, Beth, like significantly impacting. Andy, you said it. I couldn't go back. I feel the same way. I would not want to go back. I am more productive with AI than I was beforehand. I would not want to go back to a slower past. That's my experience. But do you think there's a lot to this, that what they're writing in their articles, and both, I want to give credit where credit's due. They're good articles, but like, are they talking more for the general public? And is that perhaps the sentiment is, well, I have used AI before, but I saw the shiny articles and the shiny videos, and they let me down, and I feel let down by AI, not for more, you know.
So I think the fact that there's very few early adopters, I mean, in terms of the percentage of the human population,
Right.
like us, who have actually tasted the impact of using a really brilliant model like 4.0 or Gemini and incorporating it into our work. And we haven't even had enough, even as daily users of AI, we haven't had enough time and experience with it because we just haven't had that much time since it's been available to really see the edge cases where it's going to be a contributor to our productivity. So I see this as a huge market opportunity. There's a lot of people out there who are skeptics, not because they have tried it so well, but because they've heard stories about hallucination or inadequacies and so on. And they're saying, I'm going to wait. And then there's this progression behind the scenes towards something that's really, really much easier to adopt and would be put right in front of you, whether through Siri or Alexa or on your laptop, like literally talking to an agent on your laptop. Those things will allow for much wider adoption. And that's going to continue to propel, I think, the bubble. This is a bubble. It's going, but it's not a fragile bubble that's going to burst, in my view. So let me talk about a couple of things here. One is like 1 month ago, if you told me that I could write music using Suno or Udio or whatever, I would have said, well, that's 5 years off or whatever.
Right.
But it's going, I mean, AI is capable of so much more when it's focused on a simple thing like that. That I think you're going to see more and more use cases like that, where a bespoke model is trained to do something that really becomes a compelling user experience and opens up a whole new kind of use of music. So, by the way, Suno just announced 125 million in additional funding. Okay, so the money's pouring in behind all these things. By the way, Scale AI, I mentioned this yesterday on the show. A $1 billion round.
Yes.
$1 billion. I've never heard of rounds like that before.
And not to be confused with Scale.
Right? These are like not, that was probably Scale might have been formed a little earlier, but some of these startups that are getting these huge valuations and huge funds to play with, basically were formed in 2023. It's a whole new market space out there. So, the amount of Neuron, by the way, it's a great newsletter. People read it. I get it.
We're coming out with one just because we're talking about newsletters now. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, they just did a really nice piece that said, it just enumerated all of the enormous sums of money that are being poured into AI. And that is an indicator, right?
Yes.
That's an indicator that this is in the minds of people who are really sophisticated investors. This is the venture community where they've already made obscene amounts of money on the technology armature that exists out there. They're putting their bets on AI. Why? Because they see the benefit. That's why I say this bubble is resilient. This money is not going to evaporate. So, by the way, and then the government just threw 32 billion at it as well. So
proposed, right? Yeah.
Right. One of the things that I want to say in this conversation is to distinguish my vehemence or specifically advocating for a particular viewpoint isn't because I'm like, woohoo, AI, I'm gonna get like crazy rich. It's all gonna be this like hunky dory, no problem. It is because what I see is the world changing. And I think if people are choosing not to look at it because it makes them uncomfortable, that's going to be a problem. So I want to create an analogy. Both of you know more about this than I do, but let's say that the current world is full of people who crawl, right? Crawling, you can get places. It's cool, right? Like you totally you're expert crawler. And we are saying there's a thing called standing and then walking and then running.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm good. I'm crawling. Like, look at all the other crawlers. This is not going to happen. And
Right.
I'm saying maybe try standing, right? Like, just if you can, if you are now looking when everyone around you is now running, you have a much bigger leap to get there. So so just like, you don't have to run the whole time. Run like 15 minutes a day, right? Like, play with that thing. Because we really don't think that a bubble is bursting. We think it's actually growing.
Yeah, I think it's
by the way, just on NVIDIA, there was an analyst. I own some NVIDIA stock, so caveat there.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to pump NVIDIA, but they made a pretty coherent technical argument, not on just the sentiment of NVIDIA, but on its probable valuation based on historical markers and so on, that it has by the end of this year, it could be justified to have a 30% increase in its stock price from where it is today, which is, 10x where it was a year ago or whatever.
Yeah. No, that's crazy. I think, I love your analogy, Beth. Excuse me.
That was great, Beth. Thank you.
Yeah, I do, because I think I was visualizing and I'm thinking, a crawler also doesn't have the same viewpoint. When somebody is running around them, they run away and beyond the scope or view of what that crawler could possibly realistically get to. If me and an ant set out at the same time, one of us is going to be a hell of a lot farther away in the next 30 seconds, most likely, and so there's a bit of that too, is like, well, if you're not willing to stand up, if you're not willing to peek your head up or try to move, with this, then it's going to be hard for you to understand what the possibilities are for you specifically. I'll give the example in sales, since that's where I spend the vast majority of my time at work. People are saying right now, like, oh, you know what? AI can help you with prospecting. Hell, I do it. I create custom GPTs that do prospecting and messaging and all these things, right? Great. And it's all in service of helping the sales rep be faster and more efficient, but at personalization, right? That's the entire goal. It's not to just bombard 1,000 more emails out the door. It's to figure out how a sales rep who used to take an hour to be able to do really deep, good, real research can now do it in 5 minutes. And that's great. I would say right there's a massive improvement in one particular industry that I have personally witnessed. I've had people say to me, this is a job that used to take 45 minutes, and I cannot believe you've basically recreated it in 3. Not a lesser version. I think your 3-minute, result is in fact better than maybe what I was able to do in the past. Okay, fine. But what I'm saying is, like, that's great. But the idea of doing prospecting and messaging in some future existence is now completely done by AI. Completely. A sales rep will be somebody who has deep understanding, knowledge of their industry, more than likely, and is able to convey that in a very human way. But the idea that they will have to worry about how to get deep insights into a business or figure out how to create highly personalized messaging to that business, that can already be automated to a large extent with some human involvement. And that's quickly going to diminish. And so when you think about it, you think about like, oh, is the AI bubble bursting? I go, no chance, because or that we're at the limits of where this is going, because we can see 3, 6, 9 months from now. And I go, okay, well, if that happens just in the sales industry, that would be a monumental shift for the way that a sales rep would now do their job. It's going to shift them from being able to, do the research and maybe being really good. It's going to switch it over to having really human connections with people and doing things and focusing in areas where we know AI cannot replicate human interaction. That's why I think your arts and things like that. I believe this, we're going to see a huge influx of people who almost a renaissance of going to public art installations, going to places where people are creating art in person, from like, maybe it's a sculpture, maybe it's a log that's turned into a sculpture with a chainsaw, whatever. It's not that we don't appreciate that now, and we can't look at the artistry of that artist and go, wow, that must have taken thousands of hours to create. But there's going to be something even more important about that in the future, when AI can do so much in our lives, to go and experience things like that in art and culture, I believe, because you're going to be able to say, well, I know for sure AI isn't creating this. Or to your point, that to it doing whatchamacallit, doing stand-up and doing improv and stuff.
Yeah, get you to an improv class or an improv show. It's clear they're making it up in front of you.
Right, yeah. Or we assume they don't have the earbuds, right, and they're not being fed by AI in the ears, right? So I just think there's going to be, we're going to see more of what AI, and as humans, we're going to put a higher value on things that are uniquely human and cannot be easily replicated by AI. I just think that would make sense to me, that there'd be put more value in that, when anything can be duplicated, anything can be created, anything can be cloned. I can be cloned. I can make a video, whatever. That all loses value, right? And so I think that's really where we'll see the future. That's a little off topic for what we're talking about today, but that's kind of where my brain goes with this stuff, is in this future world of AI to it. Okay, any last thoughts on this before we wrap it up for today?
Just one little factoid. This was also from that same newsletter I just mentioned, which is a good one. And that is in the pursuit of AGI, which is just a catch-all term for much more capable, agentic, and naturally interacting, AIs that can support you in whatever you want to do. A French company called H, with only 40 words on its website, just got a 220 million seed round. So what that means, a seed round means nobody's ever invested in it other than the founders yet, and maybe their family. And the seed funding of it is on the premise that what they're talking about, and probably haven't demonstrated yet, is going to be so valuable that it's worth risking $220 million to do it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I would like to have $200 to throw at a company like that. Like, I'm going to take a shot. I'm going to take a shot because this thing could be the next Facebook, Sorry about that.
My last word would be, if you're who thinks the bubble is bursting, right, and you spend 15 minutes a day in ChatGPT figuring out how to use it, then you've lost 15 minutes a day. If I'm right and you don't, I think that's the bigger risk.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. It's a great point, Beth. I just went through this in the last week, maybe not this week, but in the last week when 4.0 came back. I had 2 days in a row where I could have viewed that as I lost 6 hours of my workday, 6 hours where I tried and tried and tried to get ChatGPT to do something it had already previously been able to do, but there was something going on with 4 Omni and it was affecting the results of it. 6 hours before I got to some sort of glimmer of a hope of a breakthrough. And that is tough. That's tough. But I agree with you. I would much rather spend those 6 hours, because what came out of the other side of that is, to me, infinitely more valuable. Infinitely more valuable. All right. Tomorrow we have our what did we just say show, which is really our 2-week, our bi-weekly, I should call it, a recap show where we might talk about topics from today or any other topics from the last 2 weeks. And boy, has there been a lot of it. So God knows tomorrow we, depending on who's here, we'll have a ton to bring up, just all sorts of news stories, all the major players. Now Amazon being in there has gotten in the mix as well. So we have a ton to recap on tomorrow's show. So come back and hang out with us. That's always a fun show. And then we will obviously be back next week. We will be here on Memorial Day. If you happen to be hanging out on Monday and barbecuing or whatever, well, maybe check us out live at 10 a.m. Eastern on Monday, because we'll be here all next week as well. That's it for today, guys. Thanks, Beth. Thanks, Andy, for the great conversation as always. And we will see you guys tomorrow.